Okay, big topic. Which candidates will support a real anti-corruption bill? One that keeps politicians accountable and does not protect them. I think this should bring up a lively conversation. Jerome, the floor is yours to begin with.
Me, I will. Absolutely. The fact that the federal government is the only level of government that is not covered by an anti-corruption commission is just a joke. Scott Morrison promised to deliver one in December 2018 and hasn't. Didn't even have, the ability to put legislation to Parliament. And their model is for one where the politicians have to, lodge a complaint to the ICAC themselves. So it's not independent. It is an absolute sham of a proposition, and it would have been resoundingly defeated. We need an ICAC with teeth. We need an anti-corruption commission that is independent of government. We need an anti-corruption commission that is retrospective. That means it can look at anything they want to look at. They should be able to hold public meetings if they choose, and that is the New South Wales model. We must restore faith in politics. Anthony Albanese has promised to legislate by December. I actually did a Zoom on this, went for about 45 minutes with the Shadow Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus. He explained it in depth. It's on my Facebook page if anyone wants to have a look at it. It's really insightful and explains why we need one. I've sat through a council that's been through an ICAC investigation. I wasn't party to those investigations, but I was around to clean it up afterwards. We must have a strong, independent, powerful, retrospective ICAC, and if I'm elected, I'll form part of a government that delivers one.
Okay, John?
Okay, well, look, the Pirate Party has had support for a federal ICAC for ages. This is in the context of, supporting whistleblowers, a Bill of Rights, reducing bureaucracy. We have a whole set of policies which I guess mesh and certainly support this one. And really, we've had that policy for ages. I don't think I need to dwell on it. I think I will actually stop talking now and let things progress, but we're into it,
We're all over it. Tony?
Not only will we, but we have. So as I mentioned, Larissa Waters has already put forward a bill in the Senate that has passed the Senate. And as I said, it's very similar to Ms. Haynes's bill in the lower house, of course, neither of which the current government has been prepared to debate. Their approach has been, here's a piece of legislation that we will only actually table if you agree to pass it unchanged. Now, that is a slur on parliamentary democracy. That is a disgraceful approach. So the Greens are very keen. We'll either support our existing bill or we're very comfortable working with a new Labor government to introduce a bill along the similar lines. Labor have already endorsed this through the Senate. That doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be of that strength. And we're very, very keen. It's one of our key election promises.
And Kyinzom?
I think we are all in very strong agreement on this, all the four candidates here. One of the first absolute priorities, if elected, would be to support the immediate establishment of a strong federal anti-corruption watchdog. Australians, many of us, are not interested in politics or have given up on politics because people don't trust politicians. We need to change that. We need to fundamentally change the way people think about politics and restore integrity and trust in our government. Politics should be a force for good and people should be engaged. People should have faith in politics. And we have to get this right. I would absolutely support a legislation to that effect. And I would fight for reforms in how political donations are being reported to reduce the unchecked power of corporations and wealthy donors. That's very important. At the same time, it is important to level the playing field in an election debate by limiting how much political candidates can spend. Elections and democracy should not be auctioned off to the highest bidder. So we need to level the playing field. And of course, there is an urgent need to increase the transparency and accountability of the taxpayer-funded program. So I think all of us here will strongly agree on that.
Okay, Robin, may we please have our next question? See how many of these we can get through some 2 hours. Many items have been removed from Medicare rebates recently, including costly MRIs. Do you all agree that a properly funded Medicare system should be a priority for the next government? Jerome.
I think you'll get furious agreement from everyone here again on this question.
Yes.
Absolutely. Labor, just like the NDIS, Labor created the NDIS, Labor created Medicare. And what we've seen over the last 9 years of this coalition government is that they've, hacked at it bit by bit. They started with co-payments, and that didn't get through, but they've now ripped important procedures out of it. Labor's announcements to date to create sort of medical super centres where you can go and make it a lot easier to see the doctor. Here in Bennelong, there's a private version of that called Wise Medical. It's in Macquarie Park. It's great, but it costs a lot of money. And it should be easy and free to go and see the doctor in Australia. There'll be 50 super clinics across the country, and that'll also take pressure off emergency departments and save, all levels of governments a lot of money. There's also a huge focus on, and it's not so much an issue for Bennelong, but one that we should know about. It's incredibly hard to see the doctor in the regions, and that's something that a Labor government will prioritise.
John, did you have much you want to add to that?
Well, I'll just echo what I've said, that, pirates do support public education, public health, support for mental health, dental care within Medicare. We've long supported those things and will continue to do so. And I'm sure we're going to be in heated agreement on this. And I do direct people to my comment in the chat. Look, there is a bigger world out there, and it's all very well for us to be in heated agreement, but the election is bigger than just us. Let me emphasize that. Let's think a bit more broadly. But mate, I agree with all these things put forward so far.
Tony.
Yeah, I think heated agreement is probably the expression. The Greens do have a very clear plan of including dental care and mental health as part of Medicare. We know that these are, particularly in recent years, the mental health strain of COVID has been significant. We know that dental health is really important for overall health. So the Greens are fully committed to ensuring that Medicare is there on a needs basis for all Australians.
Yes. Kyinzom.
Same with us. We are fully committed to ensuring that Medicare works for everybody, and that it includes dental, mental health, and that MRI, everything basically. Yeah. So I think it's pretty simple.
So really, the disagreement between the four of you is how much Medicare should be funding, rather than whether it should be extra. So everyone agrees to that. Okay, Robin? When it comes to real action and influence to help reverse the effects of climate change, please outline your action plan in order of priority. Jerome?
Yep. So Labor's emission targets are 43% reduction by 2030, and that involves a number of things. Primarily, the real investment in solar power and community batteries across our community, but also, we've just announced a policy for an EV supercharging network and a hydrogen network. transport is, I think, about 18 or 19% of our emissions, and we need a government that actually doesn't think electric vehicles are on the weekend. We've got runs on the board on this, particularly locally. As I've said, my record here locally is strong. But first and foremost, we need that emissions reduction target, which then can flow through all levels of government and policy and establish a framework to deliver these things. We've got our policy, it's been out, it's been expertly modelled and costed. It's been open for scrutiny for a couple of years, and we see now the government or the Liberals are trying to run a scare campaign on it. I'm sick of the politics of climate change. We just need action.
John?
Okay, well, certainly we are we do support the idea of individual. Goodness me, I'll have to get rid of that phone call, sorry. But yes, we do support the idea of microgrids, personal solar, and batteries and so on, electric vehicles to help into the mix. But we're also talking about improving our technological base to the point where we really get behind green power, and we are actually in a point to export things that have basically been made with green energy, and therefore actually export green material, export a carbon saving to the rest of the world. And certainly in terms of implementing carbon prices and similar things to basically make our economy going in that direction, that's certainly something that I support. So we do have a comprehensive policy position. Forgive me that I'm not across all of it at this stage, but certainly climate is something we take seriously. And one of our branch members is indeed Climate Emergency, who basically claimed to the election with that single item on their agenda.
Tony?
Okay.
The Greens might have someone say on this?
Yeah, I think this is where the Greens differ, not in intent, but certainly in terms of action plan. The Greens will immediately ban the construction of any new coal, gas, oil infrastructure. There's 117 projects on the books. If we're going to be serious about climate change, if we're going to reduce emissions, we've got to stop all new construction of coal and oil and gas. We've got to phase out the burning of fossil fuels by 2030, and the Greens have got a plan to do that. We need to stop subsidies to big oil and gas. This is $10 billion a year that are going through to these sectors for burning diesel largely. We're going to ban all donations from the mining and resources sector to politics and cap all donations at $1,000 a year. So stop the money and the dirty money that's impacting politics. We're going to put $25 billion into building a new grid so that we can distribute electricity better. And we've got a whole range of plans around looking at how we can support households and businesses transition off gas into cleaner electricity. So I would argue that we have a lot of very concrete plans ready to go.
Kyinzom?
I will have to agree with Tony on this one. We cannot take or tackle the climate crisis without phasing out coal and gas. I think that's very simple as far as our party goes. Of course, Labour has a much stronger commitment as compared to the current government, but Labour has still left open the door for new coal projects, and that is very concerning. Likewise, again, the target that Labour has set is, of course, a lot more ambitious than the LNP government, but still, the targets from both the major parties are not aligned with science. So our party is committed to setting a target to cut Australia's emissions by at least half by 2030. And that is important. We need critical action in this critical decade. It's the action, the urgent action that we take this decade, not by 2050. And I think these are the two main things. And of course, we would support policies that would enable the uptake of electric vehicles and improve household energy efficiency, support the development of new clean energy industries with a particular focus on ensuring that there are jobs for communities that have traditionally depended on the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah. Robin, may we please have our next question? Coming back to the topic of federal ICAC, would you vote for a Helen Haynes style integrity bill? I feel like we covered this, but we can do this as a quick yes, no, maybe in between. So, Jerome?
This is a downside of going first. I'm not quite across what a Helen Haynes style integrity bills is, but you know my position on a federal anti-corruption commission. I think that's covered the answer. It's got to be independent. It's got to be powerful. It's got to be retrospective, and it needs to happen quickly.
John?
From what I understand of the Helen Haynes bill, the answer is yes. So now we can move on.
Tony?
Likewise, I understand that Helen Haynes's bill in the lower house is very similar to the one that we brought through in the Senate. So the answer would be yes.
Yeah, same here with me. From what I have understood, I would yes support this bill.
Fantastic. Robin, may we please have our next question? Do you have a plan to address the growing crisis in the university sector? Excessive casualization, reliance on full fee-paying student revenue, the brain drain, and the vitality of cutting-edge research, or viability of cutting-edge research. Jerome.
Yes, so Labor has a plan for 20,000 extra university places nationally. We've seen the coalition government slash and burn the university sector. And let's not forget, whilst Jerry Harvey and his mates made billions and millions off JobKeeper, the university sector were deliberately excluded, and researchers' entire careers have been destroyed by that very deliberate decision of the Morrison government. Casualisation is a economy-wide problem, and Labor is going to task the Fair Work Commission in putting job security as part of one of their key objectives. Pay equity, sort of gender pay equity, is another one of their objectives, and that will hopefully address the growing issue of casualisation of our workforce.
Brilliant. Under time at that, John.
Okay, well, I have to say, I'm just looking at the Pirate Party platform, and we do actually have a section on universities, and we talk about academic freedom. We talk about the papers that are written by university academics being open access. So we obviously have our thing around intellectual property and so on. But, some of our policy items are impose benchmarks to guarantee the use of public funds for academic salaries, teaching material and research, expand full-time academic positions targeting a maximum student-teacher ratio of 20:1, guarantee study leave, research time and field work in academic contracts. Now, the point is our policy does explicitly list these items, and, obviously, it's a broken record, but people are welcome to check out our website and check out our policies. But the other thing I think I've also mentioned is that there are a lot of hollow numbers. CPI that doesn't include the price of land and the price of interest in making a purchase. Unemployment figures that don't consider casualisation or precariousness of work, which is basically a change in the nature of work separately to how much you're actually paid. And, I've sort of identified this whole university thing as an issue, but I would also say we identify the fact that a lot of these numbers are dodgy and they're much abused, certainly by the Morrison government that loves to say, oh, look, unemployment has improved by so many %, and there's just so much hidden behind that simple mere assertion. But I think lots of people love to trot out simple numbers and just assume too much of them. Anyway, so I'll leave it at that.
Tony.
The university sector is one of the most important sectors in our economy, as well as obviously, a very important part of social life and of the development of society itself. The Greens have a very clear plan to reverse the Liberals' cuts, democratise our universities, giving power back to the staff and students on the campuses. Clearly, a key part of our policy is to abolish all student debt. And provide free lifelong education for universities and TAFEs, and making our public universities and TAFEs more sustainable and accessible through a green education infrastructure fund. So we're very much in favour of providing quality university education to Australians and as an important part of our export industry.
Fantastic. And Kyinzom?
While our party doesn't, we haven't really outlined a policy on this issue per se, what I personally believe is education is one of the most important sectors of our society. And the fact that this government over the past decade has really neglected the public education, especially of our universities, is of great concern to me. Again, we briefly talked about it during the COVID. While big corporations have benefited, heavily from the job seeker program, our researchers and our academics have not received, funding and support, and that is a serious issue, and it really reflects, the priorities that this government has for this important sector.
Next question, please, Robin. To all candidates, can you please discuss your party's position on the last religious discrimination bill? Jerome.
Well, I don't think any legislation should give someone the legal power to discriminate against someone based on their race, sex, or gender. That's my personal belief. Yep.
Yep. John?
Okay, well, be it Fusion or the Pirate Party, we have a very strong commitment to secular issues and basically keeping religion out of the process of government in Australia and making it a private affair. And if you look into my own history, I was actually at one stage a candidate for the secular party because that was one of my driving interests. I'm a vice president of the New South Wales Humanists. So I can but say I'm very strong on secular issues. And again, my interest in history, I'm actually familiar with the Defence of Government Schools movement. Now, that's putting a bit of a context of saying, look, I have secular credibility. I've pushed secular issues strongly. And certainly the idea that religious bodies should be able to discriminate against others based on their religion is quite naff in my view. It's certainly my view. It's the view of the Pirates. It's the view of Fusion. If you check out secular humanism and personal rights and civil liberties in the Fusion Party framework, it's certainly there. So yeah, I'm certainly strongly against that religious discrimination bill. And I do think it was Morrison, I guess, playing to the crowd, trying to placate the religious lobby. And I would observe that, like, the Liberal Party does have that tension between the people who believe in individual freedom and the belief, basically individual freedom versus the people who believe in religiously based social intervention. And there's a tension between different parts of the Liberal Party, and you only have to look carefully to see these things. There you go.
Tony.
Our position was very clear. We voted against the last religious discrimination bill. It didn't get to the Senate, obviously. Adam Band in the House voted against it. The Greens are very much in favour of ensuring that there is no discrimination of anyone based on any of these factors: religion, sex, sexuality, sexual orientation, gender, any of the things that these current wedge type bills that the Liberal Party have been bringing in have been trying to devise. So we would completely reject the bill along those lines.
And Kyinzom.
Yeah, I strongly agree with everyone. In this day and age, we cannot simply accept such a bill. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I would strongly oppose any bill that will discriminate anyone on the basis of their sexuality or race or religion.
Robin, may we please have our next question? For all of the, okay. So the question is, for all of the independents, where do your preferences go? But
we have no independents. We're all members of some party of some way, shape or form.
Well, I was going to say, I think this is a great opportunity. I'm not going to give this to someone specific. I'd actually like to see you guys explain how preferences work under the current election system, because I think there's a lot of old beliefs still in play that this is a great time to break those
Thanks,
down.
Emily. I'll go first as per usual. So first thing you need to know, at this election, very different to the local government election, you need to number every square on the green ballot paper. Please number every square. And in the Senate, which is a big white piece of paper, you can number 1 to 6 above the line. I think it's 1 to 12 below the line, but check that. But the green paper, it's very important. You got to number 1 through to 8. Some parties hand out recommendations on how to number those 1 to 8, but ultimately no one directs preferences. That is your decision as a voter. I've recommended a set where I've put Tony, our Greens candidate, as number 2, John as number 3, Kyinzom as number 5. But if you personally disagree with that, you can put it any which way you want, as long as, of course, the one's next to my name. Thanks.
Nice try there, Jerome.
Yeah, I thought I'd give it a go.
I think our preferential voting system is very powerful, and it's very powerful because ultimately, in a system that's dominated by 2 parties, it gives you 2 votes. It gives you your first vote where your first preference goes, and it allows you to put pressure on the incumbent government, provide funding to parties, but allows you to send strong messages. But it also, through your choice of preferences, allows you to select where ultimately your vote will end up. So there is no such thing as a wasted vote voting for a minor party. Ultimately, it does depend on whether which of the 2 major parties you put above the other. So it's almost a double vote you get by voting for a smaller or an independent. With regards to the Greens, across Australia, we have preference in our how to vote cards. We have preference Labor. So Jerome is number 2 on our ticket. Ultimately, we want to see the Greens with a strong representation, and particularly in the Senate, we're very keen to get support and get a balance of power. But ultimately, we want to work with a new Labor government and not be continuing to despair about a returned Liberal government. So we need to see a new government. The Greens are very enthusiastic about working with Labor in a cooperative and collaborative manner going forward. So that's where our preferences are going.
John?
Okay, well, slightly out of order, but certainly echoing the sentiment other people have said. You don't waste your vote, because if you were to vote for me, number 1, and I don't get in, then your number 2 gets to influence things, and so on down the track. So let's say you're tossing up between Labor and Liberal, depending on who you put first in that chain. I mean, you could basically put Jerome second last and the guy from Liberal last, and your vote would still end up going to Jerome. That's assuming we eventually end up with a 2-horse race. Now, one of the things about this voting system, it does oblige you to fill in all numbers, and you may think, look, down the track, I couldn't give a toss who gets in. And that is, I guess, a legal idiosyncrasy. That is the way things are. I do not necessarily endorse that situation being the case. A lot of people say we should have a box saying, I do not wish to support any candidates. So we talk about the informal vote, but if you are consciously and deliberately making an informal vote, that should be a choice for electors. And I do recognise that our current voting system does have a certain idiosyncrasy. If you can be bothered, basically apportioning your vote between different candidates, you will get to influence who gets in. If you couldn't give a toss who gets in after your first 2 or 3 preferences, well, okay, that's a bit of an idiosyncrasy. And goodness me, the Simon, that's right, that's the Liberal Party guy. Now, look, he's not here, and I do think, I guess I have to say a little bit in support of some Liberal Party values, the idea of reliance, the idea of initiative, what's the other one, resilience, these sorts of values. On paper, they are good and sound things. And I've been impressed with, Menzies when you look into history. There's some good things that have come in under the Liberal Party umbrella. Now, I will be the first to say at the moment, they have gone totally off the rails. but that is not to say that on paper their values do represent something worthwhile. So I think I'll put that plug in for Liberal Party values, but not the Liberal Party we have at the moment or the Morrison government. So what I guess I'm trying to say is if you vote for me first and your vote ends up going for either Liberal or Labor eventually down the track, it is still a gesture to vote for me. Yeah, basically, you're not giving a complete endorsement to the Libs. And in terms of Labor, well, if Labor romps in and they have a blank check, I think that's also its own problem as well. And both things are worth guarding against. But yeah, where do your preferences go? I haven't really answered that question, but I hope I've talked effectively about the issue.
Kyinzom?
I think my response is pretty straightforward. I have not made any deals and I'm not preferencing anybody because I believe voters should decide how their preference votes are given. Obviously, I'll ask my supporters to vote number 1 for me and then number the other candidates as per their preference based on their values and the issues that matter to them. If I may add one more thing, of course, it's up to every single party to make their own decision. But I was really, and I've said this to you, Jerome, the other day about your choice of preference. And, I have felt that many of the issues that I stand for, there is a strong alignment with what Labour is standing for and with what Greens are standing for. However, it was quite disappointing, I must say, to be very honest, to see Labour, preferencing a Liberal Democrat candidate above me. And so, yeah, I just want to put it out there. Thanks.
Okay. Robin, let's have the next question. This was for Labour and Greens. John and Kyinzom are also welcome to answer it. Do you support vote turnbacks and offshore detention?
I think in this space, we just need a significant amount of compassion. What we've seen under this government at the moment is that they've made decisions on refugees for political reasons. New Zealand offered a deal to resettle offshore detention. Those in offshore detention are 10 years ago. And all of a sudden, a couple of months ago, the Morrison government said, yep, we're going to do it. 10 years later. You've got this poor family in Billawheeler, or from Billawheeler. They're now, separated. That's a political decision that can be fixed tomorrow. Refugees locked up in the Park Hotel for 9 years, and then all of a sudden released just because a tennis player stayed there for a little bit. In my capacity as on council in the City of Ryde, we made the City of Ryde one of a handful of refugee welcome zones where we've used public resource to help refugees that are resettled here. We've provided them with contact details within council and the community to help them get on their feet locally and be part of our community. All I'll say on the matter is our refugee system needs more compassion in it and less politics. And if elected, I'll form part of a caucus that, and I'll argue that point strongly and forcefully on behalf of residents here in Bennelong who want to see change in this system.
John?
Okay, well, my first observation is that refugees are like 5 or 10% of our total intake. So we could actually substantially reduce the total number of people coming into Australia and actually double our refugee intake. Now, one reality is, look, eventually it does get a bit silly because I think there's a lot more refugees than could ever even fit in boats to come to Australia. So I think you do have to sort of put some limits in, but at the same time, you can be a lot more compassionate. Now, one of the things we are talking about, and indeed the Morrison government only very recently moved on this whole New Zealand thing, but is to actually share the refugee intake between ourselves and neighbouring nations. So we can get to a situation where refugees are not guaranteed of a place in Australia, but they are guaranteed of sanctuary between us and one of our neighbours. And I think that would actually change the dynamic a great deal. And what you do want to do, I think, if we just suddenly increase the refugee intake from 5 to 10%, I think that will temporarily basically pull the rug out from the people smugglers, and at least temporarily will sort of basically get a improvement in the situation. But certainly, you know, there are a great deal of refugees in the world. My understanding is we resettle quite a large number, both in absolute and proportionate terms, and you know that shouldn't be dismissed. But at the same time, we can be a lot more humane about it, and I do also acknowledge that.
Tony.
Greens policy on this, I'm not on mute, am I?
No.
Oh, thank you. Greens policy on this is very clear. We want to see the end of offshore detention. We want to bring refugees to safety and freedom in Australia and ensure we treat them in a fair and safe way. We want to see an increase in the humanitarian intake to 50,000 refugees a year. It's the least we can do, and we can afford that very easily. Importantly, though, we're looking at establishing a regional solution for people who are seeking asylum. We don't want them getting on boats. Obviously, we don't want them risking their lives. Nobody chooses to be a refugee. Nobody puts their lives at risk without thinking a lot about it. So what we need to do is work with our neighbours in working out a plan for how people can seek asylum without getting on boats. We want to put a limit on onshore detention for 7 days and really abolish temporary protection visas, reintroduce permanent protection visas for refugees. So I think we've got a very clear approach and policy in that respect.
And Kyinzom.
Obviously, the issue of refugees is a very personal issue to me. It is also a very issue of great professional interest to me, because I am a human rights campaigner who works with one of the largest human rights organizations. And in my professional life, you know, before I came to do this campaign, I have actively worked on this campaign to oppose the boat turnbacks and to oppose the offshore detention of refugees. You know, the Australian government over the last four years, let's talk about the last 4 years, the money they have spent, nearly $10 billion in locking up just 250 refugees in Manus and PNG. That is absolutely unacceptable. So yes, wholeheartedly, I would oppose the offshore detention. I support a compassionate response to people who are arriving on our shores, seeking safety and protection. As Tony said, people do not, you know, come here without, you know, having their choice. If given the choice, they would, and if they would. Sorry, I'm getting a bit distracted. My daughter is there giving me signals to hurry up. So yes, I'll to make it short. Yes, both major parties again on this one have supported the offshore detention, have supported the turnbacks. So I strongly oppose both of them.
Okay, Robin, may we please have the next question? What is your position on returning Pre and Maids and their children home to Billawela? I think we just touched on that. So we know Jerome was for it.
Yep.
Has anyone got anything they want to add to that, or can we move forward to the next question?
It should be the first thing that the new government does. It should be day one. There should be no delay whatsoever, and I'm very hopeful that a new government will do that within days of being elected.
John, Kyinzom, anything you guys want to add? You're good to go.
Well, I'm certainly in favour of that initiative, yes, of returning pre-nators.
Okay, may we have the next question, Robin? PM Morrison has brought transgender issues into this election. What are your views on the protection of transgender people and the broader LGBTIQ people in Bennelong? Jerome?
Just like refugees, we've seen this Prime Minister play politics with people's lives. I had the pleasure of talking to a local member of the LGBTIQ plus community down in Meadowbank, one of the markets we held the other day. And they mentioned to me that they just want to go on and live their life without the fear of being discriminated against or attacked. That's my position. I'll do whatever I can within my power to protect everybody in our community and not allow any law or anything to enable people to attack them or discriminate against them. And I think that's a view held by the overwhelming majority of our community as well.
John?
Yeah, well, I can certainly echo that, and I'll have to take Jerome's word for it that a lot of people support that. Certainly there's a very loud minority that's making a great deal of noise about it. So certainly I would also label it as a distraction. From my point of view, certainly I see a sort of a religiously inspired yak reaction as sort of what's driving this. And I think that's a significant part of it. Now, maybe I'm going too much into the weeds, but, you know, I have listened to a lot of the arguments about this, and people say, oh, you know, it's the result of recent initiatives in schools. Now, you go back a few decades when, you know, being trans was a real out there sort of thing to do. And people, even in spite of the difficulties it was going to give their lives, they still thought, look, I'm wearing these clothes and something is wrong. And they knew that from a very young age, and they moved on it. And, you know, it was a hell of a gesture to make all those decades ago. So the fact that, you know, social context has changed in the meantime, I think there's that story from history, I think, is a very pertinent one that's sort of very valid in this debate. But in broad terms, yes, it's religiously inspired and it's also a distraction, but it is something we have to deal with. That's the political reality.
Tony?
To reflect on the question, there is nothing that PM Morrison won't do. There is no depths to which he won't fall or decline. There is no dog whistle he won't blow in order to try and gain support in some of the outer Western Sydney seats. The approach and the politicisation of this has been nothing short of disgusting. People with transgender people, as we know, suffer potentially greatest challenges of mental health. They're discriminated against en masse. They're bullied. They're picked on. You know, they have amongst the highest suicide rates in our society. We should be doing all we can to protect them, ensure that our laws and our discrimination policies are clear, effective, and are working. This just makes me sick, the approach that this government has taken to politicising this vulnerable community.
And
yeah, I couldn't agree more on this one. You know, trans and LGBTQIA people are human rights. They deserve human rights. Their human rights must be protected. And what the Prime Minister is doing right now with the trans issue in this election and pandering to the religious vote is absolutely unacceptable and must be rejected.
Okay. Last but not least, before we go into the next question, we are going to switch up the order at the request of some of our attendees, and that should give everyone a little bit of a break in the order of things tonight. What we will do, I think, just so we can try and get through as many questions as we can, it's now just after 9. I'm quite happy for us to just rapid fire through. If you wish to answer, you know your order, so go Kyinzom, Tony, John, then Jerome. If you don't have something to contribute, just say happy to pass or give us a short answer and keep moving through. So with that, Robin, may I please have the next question? In the face of the climate crisis, precarious work, housing unaffordability, regional security issues, and global conflicts, what is your vision for the future and what changes do we need to get there? Kyinzom.
Yeah, I think this is, there's a lot packed in this question. And I think it really summarizes what we are talking about. You know, we are dealing with some really great challenges, whether it's the climate crisis or the rising inequality, or the increasingly unstable geopolitical environment. There's a war happening right now in Europe, all that stuff. And I think these times demand the best of us as human beings. These times demand clarity and courage. And I think my party recognizes the two major threats. One is the climate crisis, and other is the rise of authoritarianism, especially with the rise of a very aggressive China and the erosion of our democratic values. And which is why our party's position is to really have the courage, have the political courage and the political will to tackle both these challenges. And I believe the solutions to both lie hand to hand. It's to really build a resilient future for Australia by bringing Australian manufacturing back, by making Australia a renewable superpower. By bringing Australia back, we are able to insulate ourselves from the Chinese pressure. The Chinese government has weaponized its trading relationship to bully us and erode our democratic values. And I think we are living in dangerous times, and we should have the foresight and the courage to tackle these big challenges.
Tony.
It's very easy to get despondent, but I think the opportunities for Australia are significant. Kyinzom just mentioned, we do have the ability to become a renewable energy superpower. We do have the ability to change the political landscape in this country. We have the political power. We have the power to change the way politics are done. And I think for me, I get inspired, and I'm continue to be led by a party and a policy platform, as I said at the beginning, that's led by science and guided by compassion. And I think if we keep science and compassion in our policy framework, then there's no limit to what we can do.
John.
Okay, so I guess I'll focus on foreign policy with this question. Look, that we've talked about the other issues, but certainly I'm concerned about foreign policy hypocrisy. And you have Timor-Leste, you have West Papua, you have the Indonesian mass killings, and I will point out I've challenged the position of China. I gave a speech in support of Hong Kong students at Sydney University in times past, but I also recognise the fact that the US has actually strong-armed us in terms of foreign policy and what we've got up to in the past. The fact that we just gave away, important mineralogical information to overseas corporations. There's a lot of dodgy stuff that has in fact been happening. But basically, just because I'm criticising China doesn't mean I'm pro-US, and I think we have to combine those sentiments together.
Jerome.
I'm going to choose to focus on housing affordability out of that sort of omni question, because that's something I've been really passionate about for a long time in my capacity as a councillor. In the city of Ryde, we now own, as a council, we own about 35 homes that we rent out to key workers at about 30 to 40% off market rates. We've got nurses who work at Ryde Hospital who travel from the Central Coast and the Lower Blue Mountains. That's not okay. We've got police, men and women who travel from the Central Coast and the Illawarra, and that's not okay. They serve our community. You should be able to live close to where you work. Federal Labor has an affordable housing fund, $10 billion. The returns will build 10,000 homes every 5 years, which will rent out to key workers. You should be able to live close to where you work.
Okay. Robin, may we please have our next question? What role should the federal government have in funding public hospitals? Kyinzom.
I'm happy to pass. I'm not across all the details on this one, but I think federal government does have an important role in ensuring public health is protected. Happy to pass.
Tony?
Yeah, public health obviously is a key delivery of governance. The actual nature of the financial arrangements between state and federal governments is very complicated. And I'm like, I'm not going to weigh in on exactly what how much they should be. But clearly we need a fully funded medical system and public hospital system across the country.
John?
Yeah, well, I'll echo that the issue of like the funding responsibilities and just general responsibilities between state and federal government is its own thicket of issues, and you know, it would be getting too much into the weeds. Talk about this, echoing what I've said before, the Pirate Party broadly believes in proper support for public health. How that's realised, obviously, is certainly a matter of detail.
Jerome?
We've just been through a pandemic, and we now, you know, we obviously know now more than ever how important health is for the nation. The federal government should play as big a role as possible, given that they generate the most amount of income through income tax and company tax. And if they've got capacity to support the public hospital system, they should. And you'll see Labor restoring funding to that network, which was slashed first by the Abbott government and then by subsequent governments as well.
May we have the next question, please? Why should we phase out fossil fuels, and how can we replace them but still keep lights on? I'm going to open this up. Who wants to respond to it? Might be the quickest way to get through this.
We have no choice but to phase out fossil fuels. We must stop burning, and we must stop putting these emissions into the air. We're going to end up with an absolute catastrophe from a climate perspective. We can't turn the fossil fuels off tomorrow, but we do need a structure and a plan so that businesses know what the glide path is. We can keep the lights on. New electricity generated by the wind or by solar plus storage. New generation is cheaper than new coal. So with a structure and a plan from the government to transition off fossil fuels, we can do it. We can keep the lights on, but we have no choice. It will be catastrophic if we retain and remain on the current glide path of business as usual. 3 to 4 degree warming by the end of this century. We'll have untold misery for many on the planet, and in most cases, those that are more underprivileged. You know, we know that places like Bangladesh, half of it will go underwater. So you know, it's not a question of why should we. It's just how quickly can we, and do it as quickly as we can.
Does anyone else want to add to this? John?
I mean, phasing out fossil fuels is not only the right thing to do for our environment, but it is also the smart thing to do for our economy. You know, right now the whole world is moving beyond fossil fuels. And if our leaders are telling our communities that we need to rely on fossil fuels to grow our economy, it is simply not true. I think our leaders are doing a huge disservice to Australia and to our future. And the sooner we can get out of the fossil fuel, and the sooner we can unleash our potential in the renewable energy, I think, you know, the sooner we can build a more resilient and a more prosperous future for Australia.
John, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, well, I will throw in that, yes, you want renewables plus energy storage. Microgrids at the local level would be a lovely thing. And for me, I have a particular technological fix that I would love to investigate, though some people tell me government should not try to pick winners. But I wonder if there are options with aluminium smelters that are throttleable, so you can actually run the aluminium smelters depending on the availability of renewable power. And that would be a lovely thing to buffer up the electricity grid. So my particular technological dream that I've been navel gazing. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Jerome?
Renewable energy is one of the cheapest forms of electricity at the moment. It's not only the smart thing to do environmentally, but it's the smart thing to do financially. I'll just take this opportunity to plug a free and open community forum I'm holding this Friday with Chris Bowen, the Shadow Climate Change and Energy Minister. We'll have more opportunity to go into detail on questions just like this. climate change, one of the biggest issues for voters in Bennelong, and it's at Baronia Community Centre in Epping. Please, you must register to attend. Please register. There are links on my Facebook page. So Chris Bowen, Shadow Climate Change and Energy Minister's coming to Epping.
Okay. Robin, may we please have the next question? Got 10 minutes left. Let's try and smash this out. Where is the best democracy sausage in Bennelong? I'm just going to be a little biased here and assume that maybe Jerome might have a little bit more of an opinion on this than everyone else does, but I could be very wrong.
You are wrong. I hardly eat on election days. I'm obviously quite anxious and get nervous, and I basically live off coffee and Diet Coke on election day. So I've never actually had a democracy sausage locally, which is a travesty. So yeah, I can't answer that one. And I'm not going to make up an answer either, like some politicians do.
Well, I will make a cute operational answer. The best democracy sausage is the one you happen to be eating wherever you happen to be.
Very diplomatic and very democratic. Next question, please. What is your plan to restore integrity and honesty to political advertising? Anyone got something they would like to say on this?
Well, I'll say something, and unfortunately, it's not directly addressing political advertising, but I would only say if the community was a lot more willing to call out the problems and not let people get away with it, I guess I will think of a particular example with the Liberal Party advertising where they're talking about economic growth and deaths from COVID and all these sorts of things. And I think there's an article by Alan Austin on Crikey where he does an analysis and says they have cherry-picked a bucket load of those numbers. And the idea that the Liberal Party are good economic managers is basically laughable, but a bucket load of people believe it. But the point is, for me to sit on a stump and say, oh, they're making shit up, that really doesn't mean anything. The community at large has to recognise it and push back. And I'm not sure that regulating advertising is what we want to do. We basically want to have a broadly speaking, a more sceptical voter that is not willing to call out these things.
Kyinzom?
Yeah, I mean, it is very worrying that right now political parties and candidates in Australia can actually lie in advertising. AEC can, of course, check on whether we are following the technical rules, but they are not able to, or they are not mandated to check the substance of any advertising. And I think that must change one way or the other. The other thing is, again, on the money that is being spent on political advertising, and I touched on it briefly before, that we need to level the playing field. Right now, someone like Clive Palmer, one of the biggest miners in the country, can throw away some 70 million on advertising is absolutely obscene, and we have to find a way to stop that and make sure that all candidates are able to contest have the equal opportunity to share their vision and plans for the future with Australian people.
Tony?
Yeah, so the Greens do have a plan to stop the spread of misinformation and really looking at strengthening the powers of the Australian Communications and Media Authority to try and achieve a higher level of truthfulness. But it just can't be regulation, as we know. We do need to really look at the entire argument and the whole entire issue of media diversity in this country. We need to take on the Murdoch media monopoly, and we're looking at a royal commission into the media empire to figure out what it's doing and how it's controlling the market. Press freedoms are very important. Likewise, the strength of the independence and the independence of the ABC and SBS. So it's an overall package. It's a bit regulatory, it's a bit investigative, and it's certainly independence and diversity of media that we need.
Jerome?
Look, obviously, I don't think that candidates should lie in their political advertising or in their flyers. It's a pretty hard and fast rule I've got in the umpteen campaigns I've run, and I'm sure it is of the candidates who are here today. And whatever the legislation is, personal responsibility and action also plays a big part. So I'd encourage all candidates to to adhere to, common sense and truth, and advertise on their flyers accordingly. And that's something I've personally directed my team to do in my 9 years in public life, and it's not something I intend to change. So, yeah, fully support truth in advertising.
Okay, we'll do one more question and then we're going to wrap it up for the night. Okay, so we've got 2 questions. So there's this one and then there's one left after that. This one has come from Simon Kennedy, I believe. Performing artists are the first to step up, work for free, and help raise money for people in need, bushfire relief, flood relief, etc. But this current government has left us behind. What is your plan? Kyinzom?
Obviously, as a party, we do not have a plan, but I am 100% in support of artists who have been not treated well by this government. So I'm with you, Simon.
I would say that obviously we acknowledge the size of the entertainment and the arts industry, the performing arts. It's about $17 billion in our economy. The Greens have put out plans this afternoon. I must admit I'm not all over them, but I do know that it includes ensuring for government-backed performances or concerts or shows a minimum payment to artists. Where the government's involved. It's $250 per gig, but as I said, the policy's just come out, so I haven't been able to get all over it. But I think the Greens are very strong supporters of the arts community.
John?
Okay, well, I'm actually a spoken word performer, and I have actually organised an electronic music gig. So I certainly have an interest in the live music scene in Sydney and have sort of been doing some things. I think Edna Wild has actually invited me to sort of perform some poetry at an event that she's putting together, and I need to follow through on that if I weren't so busy with the election. But in more detailed answer to the question, we do actually talk about a guaranteed minimum income and a negative income tax. Now, that means that people can actually pursue their creative endeavours. But the Pirate Party has long had a policy of basically tax discounts for venues that do live music. So we've basically had that sort of thing in our back pockets for a very long time, and it's certainly something that I'm personally involved in.
Jerome?
Just looking up online, and I note that we have this wonderful Shadow Minister of the Arts in Tony Burke, who really understands local artists and gets them. And of course, we had those stories of Anthony Albanese going up to Blues Fest and allegedly getting booed, but of course being cheered when he announced Labor's support for the arts. We saw the arts industry absolutely gutted during the pandemic, and again, casual workers and gig workers were cut out of government support. They need a boost. I don't have exact detail for this election, but know that we've got some amazing people like Tony Burke who are consistently and constantly advocating for the arts sector. Mr. Kennedy, not the one we all think of, but Simon, I will seek out Labor's policy and send it to you via Twitter or something like that, and make sure that you've got that detail.
And now for the final question for the evening. Oh, what's this? So, do you support full implementation of the Uluru Statement from the Heart?
I will start. I fully and wholeheartedly support the Uluru Statement from the Heart. I think as Australians, all of us have to be honest with our past. For us to be able to march into the future with pride, we should be able to look back at our past with honesty. And First Nations people have invited all of us, all Australians, to walk with them in this movement for a better future. And we should wholeheartedly support this. And in my party and myself support the Uluru Statement from the Heart.
Tony?
Looks like it's been an entire evening of furious agreement with some minor differences on implementation. The Greens obviously fully support the implementation of the Uluru Statement, and indeed are really keen to kick it off with the concept of truth telling. And it's not until we've told the truth about our past, and we understand that the nature of the invasion, we understand the impact it's had on our Indigenous people over the last 244 years. Have I done my maths right? 234 years. That we can move forward with with our Indigenous people. You know, they lived sustainably on this country for 60,000 years. I think we've got a lot to learn from them. But absolutely full support for the implementation of the Uluru Statement.
John?
Yes, well, certainly we support it. I'll mention, you know, obviously gratuitously, I have my community radio show out of Radio Skid Row in Marrickville, and that's immediately after Sister Agnes with her Curie Connection program. So I do have those connections, and there have been the Brewarrina Aboriginal fish traps, or is it the ones in Victoria? Anyway, I have actually covered that element of industrial heritage on my radio show. And so I certainly support the Uluru Statement, and the Pirate Party does have the comprehensive policies in this area.
Jerome?
Yes, Labor is committed to implementing the Uluru Statement from the Heart, also committed to hold a referendum, the date of which will be determined with and alongside the Indigenous community. Like a lot of things we've discussed tonight, not only do we agree, but I've also got a track record on delivering them. When I first became mayor in 2016, and also again in 2017, when the council changed hands, we started really rolling out a lot of reform locally when it comes to reconciliation. We've adopted a reconciliation action plan in the city of Ryde, which requires our staff to work with local Indigenous elders. We've enshrined a welcome and acknowledgement to country as a priority of all our citizenship ceremonies. It was kind of a bit of an afterthought before. We take issues like this, I take issues like this seriously, and I'm glad to see that it's Labor's policy not only to commit to the Uluru Statement of Heart, but also to work towards a date for a referendum in conjunction with the Indigenous community.
To wrap up the night, you each have 30 seconds to explain how you are different from the other three candidates here tonight. Kyinzom, you'll be first.
Sure. I'm a strong voice for fairness, integrity, and political courage. And as you can see, I'm the only woman running in this electorate, along with seven other male candidates. I'm not a career politician. I'm a former Tibetan refugee. I'm a migrant and a human rights activist, and I'll bring my values and life experience to Parliament.
Tony?
Sorry, I was on mute. The Greens have plans. They have actionable plans. And I think that unlike some of the other parties represented here, and obviously we do agree in many things, but we have actual concrete, fully costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office, fully funded plans, particularly around climate change. And on the Integrity Commission, we've got the runs on the board. We've already put forward legislation. So getting the Greens into the balance of power, I think, will change the dynamic of our Parliament.
John?
Our political party has considered and developed positions on sort of intellectual property, whistleblowers, foreign policy, hypocrisy, government surveillance, corporate abuse of data. Now, obviously nobody has a monopoly on good ideas, but I believe we have considered and developed packages in this area. Clearly, if that is something that resonates with you, that's something, but I guess your interests may be elsewhere. But where our specialties are, I suggest our specialties really are well developed. And I invite you to look through things. A lot of people have been converted to the Pirate Party, taking a look at our policies and going, wow, it has happened.
Jerome, you'll be our final speaker for tonight. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Emily, and thanks everyone for tonight. I guess the main difference between me and the other candidates, and in particular the major party candidate who unfortunately chose not to be with us tonight, is that I've got a track record and I've got experience in delivering for our community, engaging with them, having a two-way conversation, telling people when I disagree with them. I don't tell one group of people one thing and another group of people another, and then acting upon what our community is asking for. I've got 9 years worth of history in public life, 5 years as mayor of this amazing city. I'm the only experienced candidate in public life putting their hand up at this election. A lot of people have told me, they probably would have voted for John Alexander again. John Alexander was not everyone's cup of tea, but he was a very popular local member, and he was someone who people identified with as a local. I put it to you that I'm a good replacement for John in that I'm a local and I've got a track record for delivery. And I agree with most of you on the issues that you've raised tonight.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your crazy election schedules to do this event. The feedback coming through on the chat, everyone's very appreciative of your time. All the best for May 21st, and we'll shut the event there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you to the organizers. Bye.
Bye.